Hello, my darlings, and welcome to an all-new episode of After Dark Fairy Tales. I got a new one for you, and the original title of this one is called I Saw Hell on the Hospital Stairwell. Now, this wonderful thriller was written by a very gifted author who goes by the name Dark Hero, and Dark Hero's story was first published on Reddit Scary Stories, and I'm honored that Dark Hero gives me the opportunity to narrate his story. If you'd like to check out his real name, I put a link to his Reddit page in the description box where you can check out his other stories and his collection of stories as well. And I think he did a very great job with this one. I'm glad I get to share it with you tonight. I hope you enjoy it just as much as I did. I want to give all credit to Dark Hero, and please check out his Reddit page as well. And I'm going to jump right into this one. I want to thank all of you for your support, and to all my new subscribers, I want to say welcome to After Dark Fairy Tales. I'm glad you're here, and I hope you're enjoying the content. So, are you ready to hear I Saw Hell on the Hospital Stairwell by Dark Hero? Well, here we go. They say time heals all wounds, but mine feel like they're getting worse the longer I stay at this place. It's been a few weeks since my last post, and lo and behold, I'm still here. I know you people must think I'm absolutely crazy for staying. I keep finding myself getting ready for the next shift, waiting for another monster to appear around the corner. Why am I the only one that's seeing them? I ask myself that every time I get into my car and drive towards the hospital. What is driving me further into this madness? Seeing these horrible things makes me want to make sure that no one else that comes to that hospital becomes another lost soul, another horror story. Perhaps those are just pretty words to disguise my insatiable curiosity. I want to make a difference. I want to do something, but I'm slowly losing the strength to go on. The last few incidents have rocked me to my core, but something happened recently that almost made me lose faith in everything. It was just a week ago. I was pulling into the parking lot at the hospital when I noticed a few cop cars pulled up close to the entrance. When I got closer, I could hear a man wailing at the top of his lungs from inside the lobby. I cautiously stepped forward to see a few police officers trying to hold down a man. He was a stocky, middle-aged white man with thinning brown hair, and his face was covered in tears. A couple of officers were at the side trying to calm the man down. I looked over to see a doctor sitting on the ground covering an eye that was forming a bruise. A few minutes passed until the police were finally able to calm the man down. I briskly made my way through. I was getting late for my shift, and there was nothing I could do for them. That night, the hospital was abuzz with what had happened, and it was much worse than I thought. It took a while to sift through what was real and what was just gossip. Apparently, there was an accident not long before I got there. We had a teenage patient in our care named Danielle, a beautiful young woman with long brunette hair, a glowing smile, and such a bright personality. She was often in and out of the hospital due to some minor complications, Danielle was 8 months pregnant, and it was really taking a toll on her physically. I've met her a couple of times, though. Though she was in pain, she always kept a sunny disposition. We would occasionally chat. She would express her worries about being a young mother, her future, and things at home. Things weren't going well with her and her boyfriend. They often argued with each other, and their parents couldn't help but chime in. She absolutely loved her boyfriend, but at the end of the day, they were still children. There wasn't much she could do but go through with the pregnancy and prepare herself to be a mother. Earlier that afternoon, just before I got there, she had lost her life. That afternoon, she complained that her feet were aching and insisted that she take a walk. That wasn't an odd request at all, so she was allowed to do so. About 10 minutes or so had passed when they noticed that she was no longer walking through the hallway. They checked her room to find it empty and immediately split up to look for her. One of the nurses went to the stairwell about 20 minutes afterwards and found her body at the bottom of the set of stairs. Danielle and her baby were gone. The authorities and her family were notified of the incident. Her father didn't take it well. Of course, he didn't take the news well, and he was sad and angry and took it out on the nearest doctor. That was when I came in at the tail end of the incident. The officer questioned everyone that was working at the time and came to the conclusion that she had ended her own life. That was what got to me. She didn't seem like the person that would do that, but then again, no one ever really knows. For a while, there was an oppressive air that fell upon the place. A lot of nurses blamed themselves for not keeping a better eye on her. There wasn't much else we could do. Unfortunately, death is a commonplace at a hospital, so we're forced to pick up the pieces and move on to the next person in need of help. A few days after everything happened, that's when the stories started to circulate. Eventually, many of the staff refused to go towards the stairwell. It started off as a simple superstition, someone just died there kind of thing. Then it turned into people feeling things on their shoulders, cold chills running down their spine, and hearing noises akin to crying. Slowly but surely, the stories came that the stairwell had become haunted. Another ghost story to add to this place. I did my best to avoid the stairs. We had elevators, so the likelihood of me using them was low. I knew that if I were to go to those stairs, I would regret it. As I continued my night shifts, something at the back of my brain was scratching at me. I kept thinking of Danielle. Even though we only talked a few times, she was a life that was here. I wanted to know if there was anything I could do for her if she was trapped here. Curiosity was slowly taking the best of me. Simple curiosity that, of course, kills the cat. We were having a pretty slow night, and it was a couple of more hours until my shift would end. I did something incredibly stupid. I made my way towards the wing where it happened, got onto the elevator, and took it to the floor where she was. I stepped through the door onto the stairwell, and I stood there at the top of the steps. It was so quiet that I could hear my breath echo down the stairs. I just stood there, staring down those hard steps as I imagined not Danielle, but myself tumbling down them. I grabbed the railing and closed my eyes, wondering what the hell I was even doing there. I stood there for a few moments, reminiscing the brief conversations I've had with Danielle. She would talk about how excited she would be to have a little boy, so afraid of being alone if her boyfriend didn't stay. I took a deep breath as I felt a tear roll down my cheek. Danielle was so young. Goosebumps started to form on my skin as a sudden burst of cold air circled around me. That's when I realized that I was no longer alone. My eyes were still closed, but I could hear something at the bottom of the steps below me. It was heavy and labored breathing. Each inhale had a faint bubbling to it. In each exhale, I could hear a low crack, like something breaking. My body began to tremble. I gripped onto the railing to steady myself. I could hear it move now. It was making its way up. I could hear wet slaps hitting the steps, followed by a disgusting crunch. I didn't want to open my eyes. I stood there, saying to myself, "Don't look, don't look, don't look." It was getting closer and closer. I took one deep, shaky breath and opened my eyes to see nothing. Relief washed over me. I slowly sat down at the top of the steps and let out a sigh. I leaned onto the rails. The metal was cold on top of my head. A chuckle escaped my lips as I thought of how I overreacted, how everyone was afraid of some ghost on the stairs. My chuckle soon turned into tears. I didn't know what I was expecting. A few more minutes had passed. I wiped my face and prepared myself to finish the rest of my shift until something brushed against me. I kicked my leg and jumped up. It felt like a cockroach had run across my ankle. I looked down to see something past the railing, a hint of brown quickly going beyond my view. I slowly peeked over the edge. My jaw dropped, and I let out a scream that filled the space around me, or rather, us. She was hanging on the side of the railing, almost underneath the stairs I was on. All I could see was a blood-splattered hospital gown and that familiar long brunette hair, except it was matted and dirty. "Danielle!" I was finally able to utter, my throat sore from screaming. I heard her neck creak and snap as she turned her head up towards me. Her once beautiful smile was completely destroyed. Her lower jaw was barely hanging onto her face. What was left of her teeth were yellowed and bloody. She was hanging there with bones jutting out of her fingers as she held on to the steps I was on. I backed up slowly as she climbed over the rail, her body slamming onto the bottom of the steps. My right hand was on the handle that led to the hallway. I pulled, but the door wouldn't fucking budge. I turned my full attention onto the door and began to frantically pull at it. I started banging my fist onto it, hoping someone would hear me. I looked through the small glass window to the door to see the hallway with nurses walking back and forth. "Help me! I screamed out, but no one paid any heed to my cries. I looked down to look at Danielle. She was standing there at the bottom of the stairs. Her neck was bent into an L shape, and her legs were bent in such an inhuman way. Her hair was covering her face. She was looking down onto her stomach. The lights flickered around us. I continued to try and open the door, but still it wasn't moving an inch. That was when I heard something rip. Fabric was being torn apart. I looked back down to her to see her ripping her gown open to reveal her stomach. I cried as I saw that it was flat and sunken on one side. I stood there completely frozen. I was stuck, and all I could do was witness this horrific scene. Danielle what was left of Danielle started to dig her fingertips into her belly. The noise that came out was a nauseating squish and tearing. My mouth hung open. I wanted to scream, but nothing would come out of me. She started to open herself up, wider and wider. Then was a faint thud. I looked beneath her to see that it was still attached to her by a dry, rope-like umbilical cord, a small, misshapen form of what looked like a baby. It just lay there, parts of its body flattened, a dry, bloody mess that writhed on the floor. A noise erupted from the baby, a high-pitched chittering like thousands of maggots clamoring atop one another. Please, please stop. Let me go, I shouted at Danielle, but she started to crawl up the stairs. Like a wounded animal, she was crawling up the stairs towards me, the baby dragging behind her. I was desperate and pushed my body against the door, but again, nothing. I refused to let her get to me, so I bolted up the stairs. I ran and ran up the stairwell, spiraling upwards. I looked down, and I thought she was chasing me, but as I looked around, I saw that I wasn't going anywhere at all. It was futile. No matter how many steps I ran up, the distance between us didn't grow. She was now at my feet, her decaying hands reaching out towards me. I couldn't do anything else but let her take me. I felt her cold hands touch me through the pants legs of my scrubs. My skin was burning from the cold. I closed my eyes, ready for her to pull me down the stairs. That's when I saw something. Through the darkness of my closed eyes, I saw visions of something a couple of weeks ago. Danielle was atop these very steps, alive and well. I was looking at her as if I was watching a movie. She wasn't alone. Standing beside her was a person wearing a black hoodie and jeans. I couldn't see the person's face very well. I couldn't hear anything, but from the looks of it, things weren't going well. Danielle was yelling at the person. Her eyes were red and puffy from sobbing. She kept on gesturing towards her full and pregnant belly, and she put her hand on the person's shoulder. They brushed her aside, and she stood there with a look of pure pain plastered onto her face. She clasped her hands together in a pleading way. Then, the person, they pushed her down the stairs. I stood in awe as I saw her body roll down the stairs and slam onto the floor below. My head started to ache, and a ringing filled my ears that was so loud I thought my brain was going to erupt. I looked down onto my ankle, and Danielle, she was gone. I was alone again, standing atop those damn stairs. I pulled the handle to the door, and sure enough, it opened like normal. I ran towards the bathrooms and immediately vomited into a nearby sink. I couldn't stop myself from shaking. I couldn't stop crying. I had to pick myself up and carry the scraps around. I needed to stay composed unless everyone who doesn't think I'm crazy changed their minds. I had to continue the shift, and when I finally got home, I crashed onto my carpeted floor. I just laid there. A few days later, there was word that there was foul play involved in Danielle's death. Her boyfriend snuck into the hospital. They talked, argued, and he simply pushed her down. His statement was he couldn't live with himself. He kept on hearing the baby cry in his sleep. After hearing that, I couldn't help but laugh. I still hear the baby too. So, did my darlings like that nice little treat? Ooh, I hope so. I want to give all credit to the author. I put the link to their Reddit page where you can check out the rest of their stories. And it is dark. But you let me know what you thought about this one in the comments. And I'll be back next time with another After Dark fairy tale. And I hope that you enjoyed this wonderful thriller. Please check out the author's Reddit page and check out their other stories as well. And I'll be back again. And I probably said it already, but this story was published on Scary Stories, and you'll see that when you click on the link. So I put the author's profile and the link to Scary Stories where you can see the story posted up there. But after saying that mouthful, I hope that you enjoyed this one. I hope it gave you a nice little chill. And I'll be back with some more for you. And until then, good night, my darling.